The final business plan paper in BA 427, Business Policy and Strategy, is designed to serve as a foundational document for your capstone course, BA 499, Business Planning. Much of the research and analytical work you have completed throughout the term will be refined and carried forward into your full business plan. As stated in the course template and instructions, this assignment requires you to revise and improve your previously submitted drafts and integrate them into a coherent, professionally written strategic document. The final paper is not a collection of segmented assignments placed together. Rather, it must reflect strategic integration, analytical maturity, and visible improvement over earlier submissions. Formatting requirements must be followed exactly as indicated in the template. You are required to use the provided structure, maintain single spacing, Calibri font, and boxed formatting, and remove all instructional notes and your RLS before submission. The file must be named using the required format, final paper, last name, first name. Before submission, you should have someone proofread your paper carefully. After uploading to Moodle, you must run an originality check and make any necessary revisions before the deadline. These professional expectations reflect the seriousness of the assignment and mirror the standards expected in business planning practice. Most importantly, the final paper must demonstrate meaningful improvement over the drafts you submitted earlier in the term. You have received written feedback from the instructor and, in many cases, peer comments as well. The expectation is that you have carefully reviewed those comments, revised your analysis, strengthened weak areas, clarified unclear reasoning, and corrected analytical errors. A simple cut and paste submission of previous drafts without substantive revision is unacceptable. The ratings applied in the Excel rubric for the final paper are set at a higher level than the ratings applied to drafts. This is intentional. Drafts are developmental. The final paper is evaluative. Because you have had ample time to rewrite, refine, edit, and deepen your analysis, the final version is expected to demonstrate growth. Therefore, the grades earned on drafts are not guaranteed minimums for the final paper. If feedback was not incorporated and improvement is not evident, the final ratings may be lower than those received previously. The paper begins with a clear and detailed description of the business concept and justification for the need or desire for the business. This section must assume that the reader has no prior knowledge of your idea. You should explain precisely what the business does, who it serves, what problem it solves, and why the opportunity exists. The justification should not rely on personal enthusiasm or vague statements, but instead on logic, evidence, and market reasoning. Compared to the earlier business plan idea submission, this section should now be more refined, more persuasive, and more strategically grounded. The industry analysis section must demonstrate depth of research and analytical rigor. You must identify the appropriate NAICS code and clearly define the industry in which your business operates. Your discussion of industry size and trends should include current data, historical behavior, and projected future movement. When citing percentage growth or decline, you must specify the unit of measurement. Percentages alone are insufficient. You are expected to distinguish between what the industry was, what it is, and what it is projected to become. In addition, you must discuss seasonality and sensitivity to economic cycles. Seasonality requires an explanation of recurring patterns within a year and how those patterns affect operations and sales projections. Sensitivity to economic cycles requires analysis of how the industry responds during expansions and recessions. The macroenvironment analysis must address technological, sociocultural, economic, political, environmental, and legal deregulatory forces. This is an external analysis and must be research-based, not opinion-driven. Each factor should be examined in sufficient depth to demonstrate understanding of how it shapes industry conditions. Strong final papers show integration between these external forces and later strategic decisions. The competition analysis section requires identifying both primary and secondary competitors and completing a competitive strength assessment or CSA. You must explain the criteria used to evaluate competitors and interpret the results rather than merely present a table. The 5 forces of competition must be applied directly to your industry with an explanation of how competitive rivalry, the threat of new entrants, The bargaining power of buyers, the bargaining power of suppliers, and the threat of substitutes shape the competitive environment. In addition, you must discuss barriers to entry, considering both structural and strategic barriers. Higher-level work demonstrates not only knowledge of the framework, but also insight into what the competitive structure implies for your business's positioning. The market analysis must drill down to your specific geographic and demographic market rather than repeat general industry information. You must define the boundaries of your local market, describe demographic and psychographic characteristics of your target customers, and provide a logical estimate of market potential. If location is important, a boundary map or description of driving distance is useful for understanding reach and demand concentration. The description of target customers must go beyond surface characteristics and explore their lifestyles, values, purchasing behavior, and motivations. Market potential must be calculated logically and supported by data, not by guesswork. Strong work clearly links market characteristics to projected sales reasoning. The SWOT analysis must be presented in narrative form and clearly distinguish between internal and external factors. Strengths and weaknesses must reflect internal capabilities such as human resources, financial capacity, operational structure, or culture. Opportunities and threats must emerge from external analysis, particularly the industry and macro environment discussion. The SWOT should not be a generic list, rather. It should demonstrate how internal capabilities align, or fail to align, with external conditions. Strong papers show how the SWOT logically leads to the selected strategy. The selected strategy section is where strategic integration is most evident. You must explain the business's overall strategic direction and justify why it is the most suitable choice based on your SWOT analysis. This discussion must address your core competencies, your differentiation approach, and the major initiatives you will implement in marketing, operations, information technology, and finance. Additionally, you must describe the type of organizational culture necessary for successful implementation. This section requires forward-looking managerial thinking and should demonstrate coherence across the entire paper. The risk assessment section requires identifying the relevant risks facing the business, including financial, operational, market, regulatory, and competitive risks. You must explain why each risk is significant and how you plan to mitigate it. Simply listing risks is insufficient. You must show contingency thinking and strategic awareness. Strong analysis connects risk to industry volatility, competitive dynamics, and economic sensitivity. Finally, the reasons for success section must synthesize your entire analysis. You should identify key success factors and potential problem areas in a realistic and balanced manner. This is not a promotional section, but a strategic summary that reflects informed optimism supported by analysis. The Excel rubric used to evaluate the final paper assesses the depth of industry analysis, the rigor of competitive and market analysis, strategic coherence, the quality of SWOT integration, the strength of risk assessment, the use of research and data, professional writing quality, logical flow, and evidence of revision. Because expectations are higher for the final submission, achieving high ratings requires integration, clarity, analytical depth, and visible improvement from earlier drafts. The final paper should read as a cohesive strategic document rather than as separate assignments joined together. In summary, the final business plan paper must reflect analytical growth, careful revision, integration of instructor feedback, and professional presentation. It is expected to demonstrate strategic maturity and preparation for BA 499. The effort invested in improving and refining your work will directly influence the level of evaluation you receive.